on. So it's like, I mean, as usual, I remember going to YouTube University and feeling like so overwhelmed, like where do I begin? What are they talking about? But there was a time, I think 5 years ago now, I actually won a Pro Photo. So I use Pro Photo, but pretty much the principles are the same regardless of what brand you use. But I actually won a flash unit on some giveaway, and at that time I was like maybe it was $1,000 flash, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to sell it and make money because I don't know what I want to do with this thing. But then I just kept it. It just like stayed in my closet collecting dust, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to take it out and see. And I used, and I'll talk about on-camera flash and then what the difference that is in just a minute. But then I started using, one of these units, and I was just completely blown away with what you could do with just one unit. So at that time, when I was working with families, I used to be a family photographer, 2015, 16. Once a while I used to get asked to do events, although events were really easy. They're like, it's very lifestyle, it's very casual. You don't have to worry about posing too much. And what I used to do was I had like the cheapest flash that you could find on Amazon. I think it's the Uno, whatever, however you say that brand. And then just literally pop it on your camera, right? It's called an on-camera flash. You pop it on your camera, and then it just does its thing. It's like, you've seen those cameras that have the pop-up flash, right? So just the principle is essentially the same. It speaks to your camera, you put it on this horseshoe, and then it just, and then it just fires off. So it's still like anytime anytime I'm called to do an event, although I don't really do events as much, the on-camera flash works perfectly. It pretty much lights the whole space, right? So that's what it does. It lights the whole space. It lights everything evenly. Your model or the person whom you're photographing, the background, everything is like well lit. Everything is like uniformly lit, right? So that's its purpose. So that's what your on-camera flash does. And it's great for, just the nice odd family photo that you want to take inside your living room or somewhere else that, there's not enough space. Like even a space like this when, I just want to, pop on my on-camera flash, just take a photo, like a nice uniform light, call it a day, you're good. It will give you great results, right? But you can still, like sometimes it can be a little flashy, like I don't know if you know what I mean, like it has that flash feeling to it. So once you start exploring the off-camera flash, so you have on-camera flash where you put the unit on the camera, and an off-camera flash, OCF, I know OCF is also on camera, but off-camera flash is basically when your flash unit is off your camera, right? So how does it speak is you actually have a trigger, and then, Godox is another brand that's pretty popular. There's a lot of other brands, but it's really the same principle. You have a trigger, and then you have your light, right? And then this is your modifier, and there's so many different kinds of modifiers that does so many different things so modifiers are used to shape your light, essentially, okay? But the principle is you have your flash unit, you're using your transmitter to control your flash unit, and it just goes in your horseshoe part of your camera, just to speak to your light. And for your off-camera flash unit, you could use, like I said, any brand to speak to it. And then, I don't know if you sometimes have seen any people or anyone's like, oh, lots of lights around. Like, you don't really need a whole ton of lights to make like an image or a portrait or whatever. Like, yes, you can. And the reason why a lot of pro photographers have like say 1 light or 3 lights, 2 lights, even 5 lights. Sometimes, like, oh, let's put another light over here to light her chin. All of that is great, but then the more number of lights you add, you're really fine-tuning your light, essentially, right? So it's like if you go to like a beauty or like a glam shoot, right? You'll find a ton of lights around. You'll find a ton of like modifiers. You'll find like these scrims, they're called. So essentially, it's like white. White will help you reflect the light back on your subject's face, right? So you'll find like these white scrims around, diffusers. Like you can have a lot, like you can make it as complicated as you want it to be, but you're essentially just really fine-tuning the shadows on your subject's face or your model's face at that point to get like the precision of light that you want, right? But to really get used to, and then, you know, for your question, you said, you know, can you speak a little bit about the on-camera flash? On-camera flash is like super, like, you know, it's really easy to get started with. Just get one of those on-camera flash units, pop it on your camera, and adjust your, you know, if you're shooting manual or even aperture priority, however you shoot. I shoot manual. Manual is always better, so you have more creative control. Shoot manual, adjust your light settings, you know, you get some really good soft lighting, right? So once you have this setup going, you can get started with one light to make some really great portraits as well, and be as creative as you want with your one light as well, right? Without really overcomplicating things. So here, and you know, like I said, for me, I've been used to using the Profoto brand. So I wanted to talk through today to kind of just show, and feel free to stop me anytime to ask a question if you were like, okay, what is this? What is that? Completely okay with that. So we're just kind of going to look at, you know, where do we place this light to kind of just see. We couldn't really get the tethering or like the live. Oh, he's setting it up. Oh, okay, perfect. Oh, he did? Okay, yes. I didn't realize that. Okay. Oh, awesome. Okay, I'm gonna wear it. So you can kind of just see different setups that way while, you know, I'm shooting as well. So there's the way where we keep the light unit. There is a rhyme and reason for where, you know, where it goes. So we'll look at different places that we could put it. Oh, there you go. Look at that. Awesome. I guess the cable is probably not too.
Shall I move it?
Like, I don't know. Maybe. Maybe I can move that.
Yeah, it's restricted there.
I think this is on the wheels. Yeah. Maybe I can just.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll have a hand here.
You've got a power cord here.
I would hope that this is a very restricted.
Yeah.
I would too, but I'm going to.
Hazard.
I have very bad dental insurance, please. Alright.
So let me come that side. Perfect.
Oh, actually.
Yeah, I think that's okay. Yeah.
You can, I can.
Move it a little closer. I'm gonna. You can move that light stand at the back. So look at that. Yeah. Doesn't give a whole range of flexibility.
Oh, are we going the right way? A little bit further,
Yeah.
closer to you?
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'll try my best. I guess we'll make it work with what.
Tripping hazard right here.
Yeah, it's okay. We'll make it work. I mean, at least, you know, we have something. So we'll try and make it work. Okay, so right, different ways, you know. So okay, so we have the light set up over here. So all I have here is a C stand. Could use any light stand. C stand just gives a little bit of flexibility to aim the light however I want it to. And then essentially for one of these units that I use, it's come out in 1 second. I'm going to take it out. Be careful here. Too many tripping things here. So this one is just a magnetic thing, the one that I use. And the way I just put this on, to show that too. So this is a soft box, right? So this is a soft box, and the white portion of it gives a little bit. So the wider this is, the wider is the spread of the light, right? I'm using a smaller, slightly smaller soft box over here. It says the dimensions here, but we'll change it to an umbrella just to show like how the light spread is as well, and you'll see. So if the modifier, so these are called a modifier, right? So if the modifier is smaller, obviously the focus of the light will also be smaller, but if the modifier is bigger, like an umbrella, you will have much more softer lighting, right? Does that make sense? And then, so...
Do you mind just setting it back somewhere so we can capture it? It's on.
This way. All right, so we'll look at a couple of different ways to where we want to position this light, right? So like I said, there is a rhyme and reason as to where this light will typically go. What we're going to look at is we're going to look at front lighting over here first. So I have the modifier along with the light. I'm just going to front light her. And then we're going to look at, I'm trying to show like 3 different ways that we can have this light set up. And then I don't have a light meter here, so I typically like to work with trial and error. So I set this up at, say 6, that's the flash power that I have it set it up as. I'm going to turn on my trigger over here. Perfect. Show me that. And you can see my settings over there, right? So I'm just going to take a quick photo here. We'll start it like this. Let's see. Just don't like the camera angle. Can you come a little closer?
Sure.
Perfect. So a little bit further away. So obviously the closer she is to the light, you'll have a bit more of the hot spot. If she's slightly further away, you'll have a little bit more of a smoother light, right? Let's see. Okay, so that's a little bit too much light. Let me see, how can I? Oh, look at that. Oh, that's nice. But I'm going to reduce the amount of light that I want in her.
Is that a flash?
It's only flash.
Oh, okay.
So it's a strobe. Oh yeah, that's a good question. So let me just touch base on that too. So with regards to flash, there is one, there are strobes and then there's continuous light, right? So this here is a strobe. I have another one over there that I'll just share in a minute, or not in a minute, after these setups are done, which is a continuous light. With a continuous light, basically, you have the light on at all time, and you can see exactly what you can see what you're going to get. Does that make sense? So while you're shooting, you're like, okay, I can see, there's shadows on this side, there's light on this side. You can see while you're shooting. But with the strobe, you can't really, you can see it here, but you can't really see what, based on just looking at her, you don't know what the light's going to do, right? I do like working with strobes. For me especially, I like this particular light that I use because it's really, really tiny. And initially, one of the reasons I used to be, and I was telling others a little while earlier, that I used to be really taking pride in the fact that I used to say, oh, I'm a natural light photographer and everything. But once you start really just learning just the real basics of it, you start picking things up. But I was also nervous about how heavy the equipment could be. Whenever I've seen people, shoot in a studio, for example, right? It just felt like they are carrying, lugging around so much equipment around. And I was like, I don't, how do you take, and I didn't really want it to be restricted to a studio. I kind of just wanted to take my setup anywhere and everywhere I go. But with a setup like this, I really just need this modifier, my, little light, and then, I have a really lightweight light stand as well, and a trigger, and pretty much that's all on my camera. And it's really just all put all my equipment in a bag and kind of just take it everywhere, and I can set up a mini studio anywhere I want it, right? If you want a backdrop, you could do that, or you could do it outdoor as well. All right, so I have any questions so far? We're all okay? I'm with you? Yeah, or you're with me? Yes.
Can you kind of walk through how to properly expose the settings on your camera?
Yeah. So the right way to do it is to use a light meter. If you're using a light meter, you can get the exposure to be set perfectly and then align that with your flash unit as well. I have always just, I think I've trained, I use trial and error basically. So by that what I mean is, this thing, where did this go? Oh, there we go. So these are my settings. So I'll get to, this shutter speed over here. This is sort of fixed for now, and I'll let you know how we can change that, etc., because there's another component to it called high speed sync, but we don't have to touch on that right now. So this shutter speed, when you're using it in this way as an off camera, typically this is like set, right? So 1/200 is set, and this is what you can't really change your shutter speed over here. If you wanted to make changes on your exposure, you will make changes with your f-stop or on your flash unit. So what I typically get started with is I leave my, maybe I have to disconnect first to change my settings. So I'm changing my settings over here for my f-stop. I'm going to change it to a 4.5, so that, like as we know with the f-stop, the higher the number will have a bit more of her on focus, right? If we have a shallow depth of field, like it's a nice portrait, but then we have to use a different flash setting, and we're not going to go there right now. We'll get back to that later. So I like to use a nice magical number like f4.5, and I start from there, and I go higher if I needed to. Now with regards to the flash setting, and then ISO, I'm actually just going to take it out and just leave it to 100 actually. Okay. And just keep it at 100. No need to change anything in there. So what we'll do is,
And Joe, what's the lens that you like to use?
so this is the 35. So I'm using the Canon R6, and I'm using the 35mm prime lens over here. This is, 35, 50, and 85. I have all of those three ones for portraits. I personally prefer, and they all are great for different things. I personally prefer using a 35, especially because it lets me move around. Like with the prime lens and a 35, I can get close to my subject. I'm more of the, with my work, I'm very, I like to get creative with it. And unless I get really close to her, you wouldn't really see the distortion, right? Like if I'm trying to go really close to her, maybe you'll see a little bit of the distortion, and a 50 might be good for something like that. But a 35 has served me really well. I can get whatever is a little bit in the background, and then, do some nice portraits with
So
that.
mostly use a 35 and 50.
Mostly
because
35 and
the
50,
80
yeah.
distorts with one of the eyes, the 85.
Yeah, 85 I've actually used a lot. Back in the day when I used to do a lot of fall family sessions, I've used the 85 sort of exclusively outdoor, especially with all that lovely fall color that we get. Go out, outdoors during the fall season with all the color during the golden hour. You guys all know what a golden hour is in the evening around the sunset. Use your 85. You'll have some beautiful, that creamy light texture as well. It'll be super beautiful. So try using the 85 in situations like that. 35, I feel like it's just very versatile. It's such a versatile lens for indoor, for outdoor, and I don't have to back up too much, and I can get close to her. I can go further away if I wanted to. So the 35 has always just felt like a very, a do-it-all kind of a lens for me. Yeah.
Could you get similar results with zoom lens?
Yeah, you can use a zoom lens. Yeah, the 24-70 I've heard is a really amazing lens too. The 24-70, and then so I just have always just preferred prime because I like to move around versus just and then different purposes, right? Because I've always photographed people quite a bit, so I like to just move around, and while say if she's moving really fast, so then I am moving around her, getting all she's moving this way, and I'm really just getting shots. So I like to move around, and then the prime lens, because it's fixed, so I'm actually moving around. But I feel for me specifically, I've used a zoom lens in the past, and I've seen myself get lazy, where I'm just sitting here and I'm just adjusting my zoom,
Sometimes I have too much options.
Yeah,
Let me be creative.
exactly, because when you have too many options, you're okay, I have too many options, I don't know what to do, versus when you're you know what, I'm gonna use a 35, it's a prime, it doesn't let me do anything else, I've got to move, use my feet, and then you're forced to be more creative. right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Any other questions so far? All right, okay. So here, like I said, we are, oh yeah, so talking about the power for the flash unit. So I said, oh, we're seeing my screen here. Awesome. Okay. So, so I changed my aperture there to f4.5. And for the flash unit over here, I'm going to start with a 5 there. Then I have my transmitter on. So one thing to remember is once you attach your control to your camera, for it to speak to it, you just, once you get it out of the box, right? You're attaching this, you want to make sure it speaks to it. You just have to follow, the brand that I use is very, very, very easy. But again, all of them should be really similar. There's like something called air channel, there is a sync, like everything has to be synced, right? So if like the channel is 1, you've got to make sure this is like, channel 1 too. As long as they are set up to the same thing, they will speak to each other. But sometimes I've seen like, people will say like, oh, this is not really talking to that, like what's going on? Maybe your channel is set to 2 and that is set to 1 and they're really not talking to each other. So that's one thing to check.
What's the normal distance or parameters in terms of distance between that?
For this one to that? I mean, I would say like, when you're photographing, you're in the vicinity anyway. So it's not, like I'm not going to be, like, I mean, I've gone like 10 feet further away too if I'm using like, a macro lens, like 100, and 100 mm, and I was pretty far away. My light was here. I was fine. Like it's, so, and even like if you're like, obviously if you're like 20 feet plus, you really need a long lens for that. And, maybe not. So, yeah. Any other questions?
Does it have to be a pro photo
No.
transmitter?
Well, for this one, for this transmitter, it has to be a pro photo because this brand is a pro photo. But if you have a Godox or anything else, this one will be a Godox as well, for example. Does that make sense? This will be a Godox, the light will be a Godox. But I have modifiers for the modifier because there's no electronic pieces or equipment, nothing to this. This actually can be anything you want. I've used a Godox modifier with my Pro Photo light and this because they're a little bit more cheaper. Pro Photo is a little bit more of the gold-plated ones, and if you don't really need it, you don't really want to spend that much money on. I mean, even the soft boxes are expensive. So, yeah.
So between the continuous and the strobe,
Yeah.
Is there like a preference or?
Yeah,
for a
so
particular
a lot of
situation?
people prefer continuous because you can actually see what you shoot. And we'll show that in a second, like not in a second, like once we are done with these 3 setups, I have the B10 there, which is another light unit, which is much more powerful. I forget the parameters of like, what the wattage is for this light, etc., etc. I have to look it up. But the other light that I have is much more powerful. So this one, for example, if I have like a family, like of 5, I probably may not want to use this particular light because this is good for like 1 to 2 people because it's not as strong. But if I have, say, like, this is my studio setup, I have like, say, a family of 5, then I might want to use the other light setup with a soft box because that will give a nicer light spread and it will be much more powerful. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So let's. All right. So I have the light set up over here. It's front lighting her, and then I'm gonna see. Actually, let's do this. Actually, can we have you? Trying to think. How do I do this without moving around the wire too much? Okay. Let's do this. So I'll have you look at me. Just look at me straight. Okay. So I'm just doing a straight shot on her. And then I think I'm going to increase the light just by a little bit over here. Flash power. Like you can, stay here. All right, so look at that. So she's looking straight at me and she's well lit. You could see a little bit, mostly she's well lit. There's a little bit of shadow on the other side. I'm just going to lift this up a little bit so you're nice and kind of parallel to the light there, right? Okay, perfect. So just look there. better. Do this. Beautiful. All right, do that. So this is our front light situation. I'm just going to increase the light power a little bit more. Okay, all right. So this is basically we're lighting her from the front, which is much more even. That's nice, right? All right, so let's move our light to a 45, just a side light. So the three mostly common places where we want this light to be would be front lighting, or we have our side light, or we have, we could try a top light as well, and we could kind of just see the differences of how it looks. So I'm going to move this to get it to be a little bit on the side. Okay. This up a little bit more. Okay. So I moved this to the side. So I'll have you come a little bit this side. So I'm trying to make sure the wire doesn't get disconnected. I wish the wire was a little longer. All right, so we're in a nice angle here. I think what we're gonna do is actually, if I disconnect, can I go back to it?
Probably, yeah. You
Yeah,
just go
I
and
think
do it.
so. I'll do this. So let's do this. So look straight at me. I don't know if you guys can see the back of my camera a little bit. Okay, so now what I want you to do is kind of look towards the light. So shift your body a little bit towards the light a little bit. Yeah, there we go. And lift your head up a little bit. So she's going to be a little bit more velvet because she's looking towards the light. I don't know if that makes sense. So I'm going to try to connect this. So I don't know if you can see when I use the play button, maybe you can see this on the... Oh, there we go. Yeah. And then can I go to the next one?
When you're doing the side, is she supposed to look at the camera or at the light?
Yeah, so it's two different ways to do it, right? So when she looks at the camera, you will see a little bit more of the shadows on the other side. But here she's looking at the light. So let me do the option here where she's looking at the camera, and then you'll be able to see the difference. So look at the camera, straight on. Okay. I didn't change any settings. You could see a little bit of shadow over here on the other side, right? You could tell that. I mean, shadows, I don't know, like how many of you really like shadows? But as a photographer, for me, especially when you photograph people a lot, I absolutely love shadows. Like shadows define, they give the definition of a portrait, and they add some contrast, and they're, you know, they just really define.
They're artsy.
Right, exactly. You know, they give the definition compared to making everything flat, right? So this is what we get when we looked at front, and then if she was looking at the light, you saw the previous one, right? So that was the previous one. So and then, you know, if you wanted something a bit more, like I really like this, but I really like the side one too. For me, I love the side one a little bit better because you could see, you know, there's a really nice glow on her, right? Let's have you on the side, and then maybe I'm going to disconnect this and actually show that's that way, so I'm able to move around a bit more freely. Let's have you, I don't know, just play with your hands, just put it a little bit, and then let the dress flow a little bit. Okay. Yeah, there we go, look at that. Okay, so let's look at, yeah, just look at me. Actually, let's do that. Okay, and then give me the side. Actually, hold on. Let me show this. Sorry guys, I know you're kind of going back and forth, but Okay, look at that. Nice. So this is when she's looking directly at me. Okay? I didn't make any changes to any light settings, nothing. I'm gonna go back and then we're gonna shoot. So look at the lights. I want your body kind of just turning towards the light a little bit. Give me a little bit of your side. So look at, yeah, a little bit, and then your this hand, let's push it back, and then lift the other hand a little bit. Perhaps, or just like kind of just throw the press or something. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's do that. Yeah, look at that. Beautiful. Yeah, just keep it like that. Okay, so let's look at this one. Look at that. It has a really
lovely.
right. It has a really
Yeah.
like a fine art feel
And
to
it's
it,
all
right?
even.
It's all even, right?
Yeah.
She's like looking at, because she's the more up, and it's simple physics, right? You're looking towards the light, you get more light on you. You're looking away from the light, there's more shadows. That's it, And always something else to remember in that is the other side is going to be a bit more contrasty, but I played around with my settings to kind of just make it a bit more even. So you still see the background too, right?
Yeah.
Like you'll still see the background too. It's not like fully in the dark as well.
I like the eyes.
Yeah, exactly. You get some really nice catch lights as well. Yeah.
Can you experiment with the f-stop a little bit, or this is?
Yeah, no, you can. I mean, you could play around with the f-stop as well. So I mean, 4.5 has been my magical number. If there are more people, obviously I'll go higher so that everybody is in focus nicely. And I'm assuming that I don't know where you guys are with that, but with the f-stop, just in a nutshell, the more number of people you are, you want to increase that number. And then I also said for anybody else who joined later that you could go down in your f-stop to get a nice shallow depth of field, but you'll have to play with something else called high-speed sync, which is a different thing, and we'll get to that later, because your shutter speed is fixed when you're shooting in a manual mode this way. So f-stop wise, now you just said let's increase it, right? So say I increase it, and I do. So typically, I photograph portraits, people, as well as a lot of food in restaurants and interiors. So my f-stop is usually on the higher side. So for people, I'm usually at 4.5. But when I'm photographing food, because I want to see every detail of something like that, I typically start with a 6.3 for me, or I go a little bit, even 5.6 or a 6.3 or 7.1. Those are my numbers. I start from there and go higher because I want all the details to be shown, right? Because the more you want in focus, the more you will increase your f-stop, right? That makes sense. So let's increase this and then just see what we get, because that's what you said. So let's try that. Actually, let's try that. Yeah. But let's do this with you looking at the light. Actually, let's do that with you looking at the light. Yeah. Give a little bit of your side that way. Perfect. Let's do that. Let me actually, okay, if I just move your head a little bit and then lift it that way. Yeah. Okay, so let me show this one. So it's going to be, what would you expect? You would expect it to be darker a little bit, right? Because we increase the f-stop, we're reducing the light. There you go. I would like a bit more of light on her from the flash unit, even if I did that. So say we want to keep that setting because we can see all your pores, everything, right? But we want it to look, just give it a little bit more of that shine on her face, right? So I'm going to increase the light from here. Keep it to that. More of this. And then do the same thing. So look at the light that way. Let's try to repeat that same image.
Oops, oops.
Okay, so let's see that.
And the flash numbers, are those correspond to EVs or f-stops? Approximately the 6.6 that you're on now on the flash unit.
Yeah.
They're using the same units.
Right,
okay,
exactly.
okay.
Yeah. So let's look at this. So you could see the catch lights are back in her eyes. I increased my flash power a little bit.
It was about half of a stop.
Right, half of a stop.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I increased it to, and
Yeah.
it's like this is much more
Better.
appealing, right? Like it's she's nicely lit. And you could still see a little bit of contrast because like the black fades away, right? It mixes in with the black, so that's where the contrast. I mean, if I had a different color backdrop, you would see like if I had white, you would see the shadows on the white,
Yeah.
right? Or any other color. I mean, white it'll be more apparent, visible, but with black you can see that it sort of fades away a little bit, subtly, right? Any other questions for the second setup? And I'm gonna move on to the third one. Okay. So. So we'll change this to sort of, and then I'll have you sit down for this actually. So I'm going to change this to sort of top-down approach. All right, so the light's coming in from the top. Okay, so let's see what to expect. All right. Okay, I'm going to change my f-stop back to, let's see. So this is, does anyone know what to expect?
Her hair.
Her hair will be lit a little bit. I mean, we could also move the light at the back of her. That's where you'll see a little bit more of rim light. So I'm imagining a little bit of rim light. You'll see that if the light is actually back of her. So this is going to be much more even. But I'll show two setups where she looks at the camera and you'll see some shadows under her chin. But in another setup, she will look towards the light where all the shadows are kind of gone away, right? So let's look at both. So I'll have you move a little bit towards my left. Yeah. So let's just look straight at me, actually. Okay. This is an interesting experiment, all right? It's not too Halloween-y. You see the shadows, right? Not really what you really want in a portrait. So, all right, so let's take this out. All we'll do is look a little bit towards the light here. Let's do that. And then kind of like, just slight, yeah, there we go, that way. Perfect, beautiful. I might have to increase my f-stop a little, reduce it a little bit, but let's just see with all the settings the same, what happens over here. Better, right? But we do need a bit more power from the splash unit. You could tell the difference between the two images that we took, right? So what we're going to do is, I think, actually instead of increasing the flash unit, I'm going to change my f-stop to reduce it a little bit more, to give it a bit more of that, just that a little bit more of that, shallow depth of field, just slightly on her. So I'm going to take this out. My setting. Okay, I'm going to go back, go to 4 actually, F4, and I'm going to repeat the two images that we just took. So look straight at me. Okay, you'll still see the shadows for this one. Oh. This. So you still see a little bit of shadows, right? But let's do the other one. Yeah, a little bit of this side. Oh, much better. Let's look at this. Much better, right? Like so much better. Any questions about this setup?
Yeah, I'm trying to see. The first one was so flattering. This one she's very antsy. Is there what kind of, when you take these two different setups?
Like for the top-down
top
side,
down versus the
etc.
side.
So top-down is usually much more softer the soft box that I'm using is much more smaller, so the spread of light is smaller. Does that make sense? So if I used a more powerful flash unit and a larger modifier, right? So the spread of light will be much more even. With the side setup, you see a bit more contrast, even if I used a stronger light source. Like if I used, like 1,000-watt units, right? Like a little bit more stronger, you will still see a little bit of more contrast on the other side of your model. Does that make sense a little bit? But with the top-down approach, actually, you will see less shadows, less contrasty with the top-down approach, as well as the front approach that we saw, the front lighting that we saw. The front one has a bit more of a uniform light as well. Does that make sense? Yeah.
What is the relationship between the size of the modifiers and the lights that they produce? Like this big versus this big?
Yeah, it's more of the light spread. So the modifiers are essentially light shaping tools, right? Whatever light unit that you have, they help you shape the light. So for example, actually just for the kicks of it, let's do something like this. I'm gonna do this. You will take this out. Say if you did not use a modifier at all, right? And does someone just want to come and hold this light here for me?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about bouncing that. But let's just, let's shine it on her, okay? So you're going to have a blink of light on you. And we're doing front lighting in here, so you'll see it's okay. It's all black, but I'm going to try to show this. But this has a flashy feel and an approach to it compared to like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? How? We took like a bunch of photos really quick.
So Joe,
Yes.
this particular light that you have sequestered over here cancels out the ugly lights above us.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It does. So this was what we did.
Direct.
With no modifier at all. It has the bright sunlight
That's
feel, right?
Yeah.
But this is no modifier. So you can see what a modifier does.
So
right?
the modifier size is how much how much is lit.
Yes.
Is it the same brightness of light, or does it change based off the size of the modifier?
It does change because the larger the
Because it
modifier,
spreads.
it's spreading the light much more.
I'm sorry, physics is hard. I didn't know.
Yeah, no. I'm it's like I said, everything just feels like, okay, there's a lot of things happening here. You're totally fine. But the larger the modifier, obviously it's like helping spread that light more. And then I don't know if you ever see any studios where, I was telling a while earlier that, if you have like, because we have a black backdrop here, you're not seeing the shadows in here. But say if you have, especially when I photograph food, I do that sometimes. Like on this other side over here, you'll find like something like these, right? Your reflectors. But I have like the black side, you have the silver side, and I have like a white one as well that I used. You could use a white one for people too. And the white side will help bounce the light on the white side and bounce it back on your subject or your person who you're photographing, right? The black one will make more, so it'll make the image more contrasty, which is nice. Like say, if you have, she's wearing white and everything is too bright and you kind of just wanted to bring that extra depth, just that extra oomph in your portrait, then you keep the black side so you get that extra contrasting. The silver side will really just bring those specular highlights on her, highlights on her, the catch lights back on her, etc. So that's why you sometimes see a lot of people holding your reflector just to bring that extra bounce back. But, it's all, so this will give that little bit of that additional touch, lifting your shadows if you want it, if you have any shadows under the chin, right? So sometimes if you do say like headshots, you will see like there's like an angled reflector that's usually here because you're trying to like lift the shadows above. And it all comes with experimenting and playing, right? You'll see like a nose shadow. I don't know if you've ever seen portraits where there's like a shadow under the nose, because that's your shadow of your nose, or like shadows under your chin. So if you use this, it's kind of like just helping lift that up a little bit to not make it as contrasty. right? But I'm going to go and change this here and bring another light here because I have an umbrella and I don't have a diffuser with it. So typically when I use, I mean not all the time, but you know, there's also a diffuser that goes, so something like this, right? So it goes on top of this and it just like, it helps cut the harshness of the light down and keeps it a bit more smooth. But this is white inside, so we will be fine. So I'm going to try and change this right now. So what I'll do is, where's the other light? It's right there. Okay. So what we'll do is move this one that side.
You want me to get that one?
Yes, please.
Joe, do you have a card? I'm being called for
I do.
camera